The year is 1998. It's a cold Halloween night in Nancy, a city in northern France. Inside room 777, an artist sits freezing in his cramped 30 square foot apartment, going through magazines and newspapers to pass the time. One of the stories is about children trick-or-treating that night, and suddenly the artist, stricken with inspiration, takes out his small sketchbook. That artist's name is Guillaume Renard, and his sketches over the next 2 decades evolve into a short film, comic, and eventually a feature film. MFKZ, which is not the original title, is a story about Angelino and his roommate Vince going from struggling to get by in a cruel city that doesn't care about them to suddenly getting caught up in a massive conspiracy that puts them up against alien forces beyond their understanding. If you compare this film to most animated films coming out of the West, you'll notice that not a lot of them look like MFKZ. Unfortunately, animation is often pigeonholed into being a children's medium, so very few adult animated films are made, and even fewer go beyond being a comedy. Most people can count the number of rated R animated films they've seen in a theater on one hand, and if they're on the younger side, chances are it's probably just Sausage Party. So an adult action animated movie that doesn't exclusively come from Japan is a rarity, and that's part of the reason why I think MFKZ is an important film. As someone who follows animation, it can be disappointing seeing how little the West is willing to experiment with different genres using the art form. And that's why MFKZ is a film that immediately caught my attention when I heard about it. So I guess the first question to ask is, how did this film even happen? Well, Ankama, the publisher of the MFKZ comic, who you might know as the people behind Whack Fu, decided that they wanted to potentially work with Studio 4C, an anime studio known for films like Tek on Kinkreet and the Berserk Egg of the King trilogy. The studio has a reputation of working well with Western properties, as seen with them making the 2011 Thundercats series, one of the shorts in Batman Gotham Knight, and even a fight scene in The Amazing World of Gumball, making them a prime candidate for a co-production with a Western studio. Ankama approached them with some of their different stories to see what they would be interested in making a film of, and their answer was MFKZ, something they considered closest visually to what they were used to, which makes sense. The previously mentioned Tek on Kinkreet was a similar urban dystopia, so this was a setting that was well within their comfort zone. A deal was made, and a film adaptation of MFKZ was underway. The 3 people at Studio 4C that I want to specifically bring up are co-director Shojiro Nishimi, animation director Teiichi Takiguchi, and art director Shinji Kimura. All 3 are veterans of the industry whose combined work includes anime like Urusei Yatsura, My Neighbor Totoro, Akira, Inuyasha, Steam Boy, and once again Tek on Kinkreet. They have also worked on many Western animations such as Tiny Toon Adventures, Pinky and the Brain, Superman the Animated Series, and Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker. Together with series creator Run co-directing, they managed to adapt the comic into an incredibly fun and visually impressive film. I think an area that the film really excels at is its setting. Dark Meat City is the leftovers of a Los Angeles destroyed by a massive earthquake. It's a town where poverty is rampant, violence is common, and escape feels impossible. A big part of what inspired this city is a road trip that Run went on in 2002 from Texas to California, an experience that shaped the world of MFKZ, with Run's biggest inspiration being pretty obviously Los Angeles, but also the Mexican city of Juarez. With the help of Shinji Kimura's excellent art direction, Dark Meat City is filled with a sense of grit and detail. Polluted walkways, rusted up signs, flyers on electrical poles, and graffiti everywhere, they went all in on making Dark Meat City feel lived in. MFKZ is packed to the brim with visual information, which makes it really enjoyable on rewatches, noticing all the different environmental details you might have missed the first time around. When talking about the film's environments, I can't praise it enough. That isn't to say that other areas of this movie aren't impressive, though. Nishimi and Takiguchi's work towards the film's animation is stellar. They really make the action sequences stand out between the exciting shootouts and chaotic car chase. Seeing scenes like this in the comic become this in the film really shows the advantages of going from a comic made by one man to a larger animated production. Which isn't an insult to Run's action scenes in the comic, just a compliment that these scenes play out really well in animation. The music by Toxic Avenger and Guillaume House is another part of the film that I think was handled really well. House was in charge of the more traditional orchestrations of the film, along with the Latin American influenced tracks that really helped add to the southwestern aesthetic of Dark Meat City. Toxic Avenger delivers the more hard-hitting electronic tracks of the film that go alongside many of MFKZ's action sequences. My favorite track in the movie is Road Rage, which plays during the ice cream truck chase. The way that it mixes together with the music of the truck creates the audio equivalent of those oddly satisfying sand cutting videos. I also like the two main characters of the film, Angelino and Vince. When we meet them, they're two guys down on their luck and stuck in a city that's slowly eating them alive, but through it all they can at least depend on each other. These losers somehow manage to bumble their way through near-death situation after near-death situation and still manage to stick together. It's really entertaining watching these guys deal with whatever gets thrown at them in often unorthodox ways, and a large part of this is their designs. Inspired by the trick-or-treaters Run saw in the newspaper, Angelino and Vince are small with oversized heads and eyes. They contrast with the design of the rest of the world, setting them up to be outcasts in Dark Meat City while also showing their position as underdogs. Most of the characters of the film tower over them, making everything around them feel like a threat, and then seeing them overcome these threats becomes a big source of the film's entertainment. There are simple designs that serve a narrative purpose while also being easily recognizable. In case you haven't realized it yet, I really like this film, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone who has an interest in seeing a good animated action film, but what I think isn't necessarily the consensus of the film, so I should talk about the reviews that it got. The film wasn't received very well from critics, with only 41% on Rotten Tomatoes. Granted, this is based on only 17 reviews, but it still isn't great. So I'm going to break down some of the criticisms I saw of the film, as well as some of my own problems with it. One of the most common issues brought up was the film's pacing, and I get it. The film throws so much at you in such quick succession that even I reached the 50-minute mark and was sort of shocked to realize how much of the film was left. I'm not going to say that it isn't an issue, but I feel for a film like this that prides itself on being an over-the-top action film, for me at least, it's easy to just sit down and go for the ride, though I wouldn't say everyone will agree with me on this. Another aspect which I actually do have a problem with is Angelino's love interest, Luna. In a film that's as unique in a lot of ways as MFKZ, Luna and her relationship with Angelino is just really basic. She isn't really given much development or screen time, and it feels like the story gives her character much more symbolic weight than actual things to do. The comic does a bit more with her, but not much. A lot of this could just be a reflection of Angelino's obsession with her, however, I don't think this changes the fact that she just isn't very interesting. I also saw a lot of people refer to the film as style over substance, and in this case I'd argue style is substance. Action films live and die by their ability to present visually interesting action scenes that entertain an audience. This is and should be the top priority of any action film, so even if it is style over traditional substance, that doesn't mean that the film isn't doing its job right. Though I do think there is a strong argument to be made that a lot of the substance of the story was lost while adapting the comic. MFKZ is a 600-page story that had to be cut down to just 90 minutes. This put Run in a position where he had to make sacrifices to get the film made, and in the end, he decided that the focus had to be put strictly on Angelino and Vince. This meant that many of the side characters of the story that were more fleshed out in the comic had their roles significantly reduced in the film. Among some of those storylines is Agent Crocodile's descent into madness, an interesting look at a Men in Black grunt losing his mind and going AWOL. Taking a character that could have just been another guy chasing after the protagonist and giving him a more dynamic role in the story. The Luchador storyline, which used to be a significant portion of the story, is reduced to mostly just the parts where they directly involve themselves in Angelino and Vince's storyline. You wouldn't guess it from watching the film, but El Diablo was significant enough of a character in the comic that he got his own spin-off. The tension between the villain Mr. K and the government as K's security forces thoughtlessly gun down innocent people was non-existent in the film. The government just seems to come off as complete puppets rather than more three-dimensional characters that have their limits to what they'll tolerate. Popeye forming the big one and uniting together the gangs, police, and military in the face of a seemingly unstoppable threat is completely glossed over. In both the comic and movie, there's a scene where Mr. K discussed part of why he finds humans inferior is that they don't value each other's lives, often killing one another without thinking, while his species are united by a common ideal. And you can see that he has a point. Dark Meat City is so desensitized to violence that life holds almost no meaning there. So Popeye managing to get people who previously were at each other's throats to come together and protect one another really hits home that theme of the story. And unfortunately, it sits on the cutting room floor. And finally, Bruce's story is cut down as well. In the movie, he's a menacing villain and a threat to our heroes, but we don't get to learn all that much about him. Meanwhile, in the comic, we learn through his backstory why he holds such a disdain for humans despite being one, and why he feels so dedicated to finishing what he started with Angelino. And spoilers for the end of the story ahead, skip to the time above if you don't want to see it. His final moments in the film are nowhere near as badass as they are in the comic. Turning what was an awesome last stand between someone who gave up on the human race and a group of people who represent humanity's ability to come together against adversity into a cool but much more anticlimactic moment. Altogether, I feel after reading the comic that maybe a story like this would have worked better as an animated series, but Run wasn't offered a series. He was given a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to adapt his story that he had worked on for years into a movie with the help of a talented and experienced anime studio. And when you think about it like that, you can't really blame him cutting a lot of the stuff that he did. He could have tried cramming more scenes into the film, but that just wasn't going to work. This film was packed enough as it is, and with 100% of funding coming from Onkama, they weren't really in a position to push the runtime any further than what they were allowed. It took 8 years between initial pre-production and the final release of the film. During post-production, they didn't even have their release secured, so the people working on the film didn't even know if anyone was going to see the end result of years worth of effort. So it's honestly a miracle this movie even got made, and in interviews, Run said that the process of making it really humbled him. Getting to understand the team process and having to cut the story down into something that the crew could realistically make with the budget they were given. And I think Run is really the heart of MFKZ. He's clearly a guy who values his small beginnings and even sometimes goes by the artist name 777, his old apartment number. He took a bunch of drawings he made and managed to grow it into a crude but ambitious short film. He was then told to shelve the idea by the people he worked for, only to return to it, make it a comic, and then a goddamn film. And sort of like Angelino and Vince, you just want to root for the guy. At its core, MFKZ is Run making something he thought would be fun. Throwing many of the things he loves, from wrestling to the film They Live, into a blender and giving you something that he enjoyed making and he hopes that you, the audience, enjoy too. And that's a spirit that the film manages to keep alive. Despite the areas of the film that feel lacking due to the cuts, it still manages to remain a good time. A good time that, unfortunately, unfortunately I don't think has gotten the attention it deserves. Making less than $1 million worldwide and with only 2,500 reviews on IMDb, this movie wasn't a massive success, but with the film currently on Netflix and a sequel somehow willing itself into existence, there is no better time to check this film out. If anything I've said so far interests you, I think you owe it to yourself to give the film a try and potentially read the comics too if you want the full story. I think critics underrated what this film is. Despite the issues they might have had with it, it's offering something that you really can't get anywhere else. It's the result of many talented people coming together across borders to make something distinct in the landscape of animation, and I think that's something that ought to be celebrated. Hey everyone, just want to say thank you for watching the video, and if you enjoyed it, feel free to subscribe for more content. I really enjoyed making this video, and I'm really looking forward to my next video. Stay tuned for that, and just gotta say, I hope you're all having a great day.